Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on Season 2, Episode 1 of Star Trek Discovery, entitled Brother. And from right out of the gate, I gotta say, it's actually good having this show back, especially with its somewhat, I guess you could say, noticeable course correction. With the addition of Captain Pike and, the Enterprise and things like that, it really harkened back to me a very Star Trek-like feel. Even though there were aspects, admittedly, in the episode that were more Star Trek 2009, the Abrams-verse, the Kelvin timeline, whatever you want to call it, the whole space jumping thing, it was right out of Star Trek Into Darkness with Kirk and, Benedict Cumberbatch's unfortunate turn as Khan. And there were aspects of this episode that were really action-packed, really action-oriented, and I'm not really complaining about it wholeheartedly because it did keep me, attentive. It did keep me enraptured with the episode. But I just felt like there was a different vibe all of a sudden. It didn't have the overwhelmingly dark sort of overtones overhanging the episode, at least to my estimation watching it. And, because I am such a fan of the original series, and especially that very enigmatic time period where Captain Pike was the captain of the Enterprise before Kirk and all that kind of stuff, I was really impressed with Anson Mount's portrayal of the character. He was immediately likable, and I was really kind of apprehensive about that. I have to admit, in the early going, when I had first heard about his being cast as the character, I was apprehensive because I liked the original portrayal of the character a la Jeffrey Hunter in the original pilot for Star Trek, the original series, as well as those, interspersed appearances from the cage that were lopped, apart and thrown into the two-part menagerie. We got to call back on that. And even Bruce Greenwood in the 2009 and Kelvin timeline movies, the first two, in any case, I really liked his portrayal of the character. And so it's one of those things where, even though I have no, rights ownership or anything like that, I kind of feel protective of the character because I am a Trekkie, because I like and love certain aspects of, the franchise, and that, of course, has been the long-standing argument from people who have not been very pleased with Discovery, that it doesn't look and feel like the thing we utmost love. But I tend to be a lot more open-minded, and I enjoyed a lot more of the first season of Star Trek Discovery than a lot of other people seem to give it a fair enough shake, even though I did voice my criticisms and concerns from time to time. So seeing Anson Mount come in, again, he was likable from right off, the transporter pad. In the early going of the episode, I really loved that sort of internal mechanism look of, like the turbo lift, and when everyone's on it, and, Saru is talking about all of the energy signatures, and they're bandying, ideas back and forth, and the guy from the Enterprise, the science officer, is basically saying, well, no, it's the signal was really strong, and there was one that was, active for long enough that we could get a read on it, and we actually got a beat on it because it lingered around for so long. So that's where we're headed. That's where we're going. We're going to go find out what this is all about if we can. And so I liked that aspect of the exploration side of it, the curiosity. I liked, basically Captain Pike's introducing himself, even though I'm not a fan of the Tilly character, and I was rolling my eyes and face palming during that entire exchange that I'm sure the mass audience who appreciates the show probably found to be adorable, cute, and funny. Her talking about, Pike's nails and whatever. It's just like, really? And she's on the command track? Really? I can't see her as a captain in the future. I wanna give her a fair shake. Later in the episode, she actually serves a purpose, and it was like, okay, good. I can dig her in that, when she has to pull the asteroid in, and she's doing the mathematics that are involved and required, gaining Stamets' attention, which it was really interesting to see that Stamets wants to be anywhere but here. He wants off. The Discovery, he wants to go to Vulcan. He's already put in a request for transfer. It's been approved by Starfleet. He's going to be a teacher, whatever it is, on Vulcan. And I have a feeling that's probably going to be something that changes throughout the course of the series. He will probably find a renewed passion for staying aboard or something. I could be wrong. That's just my speculation. But it's an interesting dramatic beat for his character, of course, because of who he lost, And so I found that heartening when he's viewing the message, from the Doctor. And just thinking about how shocking that was in season 1 when Ash Tyler breaks his neck and he's gone for all intents and purposes. Thankfully, the actor is not gone. He's still going to be involved to a certain degree in this second season. And, but, as I say, with the problem that is arisen with these energy signatures, whatever they happen to be, it's probably, I almost think of it as probably being like a gateway or a doorway. Whatever this angelic seeming creature is that now appears in the opening credits as well, but Michael Burnham seems to get a fleeting vision of during one point in this episode we saw in the original teaser trailer and such for season 2. Whatever this creature happens to be, it's almost like Darkseid coming through a boom tube in the DC Comics universe. Some very evil entity or conquering entity is trying to come through to our side, whether from the mirror universe or some other universe or some other plane of existence. And I have a feeling that these energy signatures are indicative of its trying to come through. Whatever it happens to be. And of course, the idea of the episode being called Brother, well, Spock isn't in the episode at all, but there are definitely overarching aspects to the episode that have to do with that harken back to flashbacks involving Michael Burnham when she was first brought back to the home of Sarek and first introduced to Spock as a child, and whatever collision there was between them, whatever divide was born between them, the knee-jerk reaction is to assume and speculate that it was Spock's responsibility. It was his doing. But we find out through the course of this episode there are some minced words, and they don't overtly give a tip of the hat to what exactly it is, but especially in the dialogue between, Michael Burnham and Sarek, he denotes that there was something, and it's something that is really rubbing Michael the wrong way. And it's because of a level of guilt, a pang of guilt because she feels responsible for whatever it was. When this was first revealed, I really began to become apprehensive, and I was like, I hope it's not going to be some kind of attraction thing where either Spock, which is highly unlikely, or Michael put the moves on her, respective adoptive brother, and this is what created the divide between them. I really, really hope it's nothing like that. I can't off the top of my head come up with any other alternative as to what it might be, but I really hope it's not something really semi-egregious. Even though they aren't blood relation, it would feel utmost awkward to me if that was the impetus behind their divide. As we know, with the history of Spock in the annals of Star Trek, he and his father did not get along, and apparently he and his siblings, yes, remember, there were two, a half-brother, Sybok, and apparently an adoptive sister in Michael Burnham. Spock is not exactly the most reciprocative of any familial connectivity, at least it be said. And so it's somewhat interesting to learn that it was not actually something Spock brought about necessarily. Now, of course, this is Michael's perspective on it. Perspectives, truths, as we interpret them, can always be different from the next person along. And maybe she's considering something she did, some actions she took, and it could be a misunderstanding completely. But because Spock had effectively cut her off and cut Sarek off and cut his mother off, he went off on his own and never got back into contact with any of them. It's really grasping at straws to piece it together at this point. But the thing I find interesting about the implication is that Spock, as we find out by the end of the episode, he was experiencing nightmares as a child. His mother, Amanda, had given him this artistic template to try to quell whatever those creatures, whatever those visions were. And eventually he would succumb to them again in his adulthood, his young adulthood. And this was something, this was the impetus, the driving force behind his now leaving the Enterprise, going on leave. And as Michael finds out in the end, he knows very much about these energy signatures. He's pieced a lot of it together. And it is her summation, and we as the viewers have to agree, because obviously that's the case. This is what drove him away from the Enterprise. This is what is fueling wherever he is, wherever he has gone. He is in search of something, and it heavily reminded me of Star Trek the Motion Picture, because, of course, what brings Spock back from Vulcan and from completing, the purging of all emotions is the sensation of V'ger being out there in the universe, seeking something, searching for something. In this case, it was its own creator and humanity, in a sense. And so whatever this is, this driving force behind whatever Spock is up to, it has to do with piecing together this mystery and finding out what this entity is. And as we see in the preview trailer for the entirety of the season, which is highly action-packed and highly contrary to the norms of what, Star Trek is usually considered to be, much akin to those elements that I spoke of earlier, the sort of spacewalk, flying through space in the asteroid field that was depicted in this episode. And instead of a red shirt getting killed, we got an obnoxious blue shirt, science officer. He bit off more than he could chew, definitely. But as we glean from the trailer, whatever this entity is, seems to be having strange effects on our crew. At one point we see Tilly seemingly melting. At one point we see the mirror universe version of Captain Georgiou, who has now become part of Section 31, like almost phasing like a shapeshifter. I don't know if these are effects that, are being suffered because of these energy signatures, or if it's something else. Of course, we have to be reminded of the fact that when we left off with Tilly in Season 1, there was like a spore that entered her. And, there was a promise overhanging that this would be touched upon again in the second season. I don't know if her seeming melting has anything to do with that. Even though I really have a very, very low tolerance level for her character, I hate her character. I'm just going to be bold-faced with it. I hate her character. But even then, I don't necessarily want to see the character suffer and die and melt in that fashion. Send her to another ship, but send her somewhere else, and just let her live and have her career and whatever. But I can't really speculate as to what this entity is. The fact that it has these almost demonic, angelic combination wings, and the fact that it is red temperature in its color palette. The ghostly vision. I almost thought perhaps that when Michael was seeing this vision that it was going to end up being Georgiou. I didn't know, because of the original teaser trailer, I didn't know if Spock was going to show up here. I didn't know if Georgiou was going to show up in this episode. Those are obviously things we find by the end that are yet to come. And I liked the explorative sort of aspect of finding the downed ship on the asteroid and saving the people involved. Tig Notaro, who guest stars as, the engineer who's just barely keeping the people alive. She stayed behind. They've been there for 10 months. It kind of reminded me of the TNG episode Relics in that aspect, because of course they found, the downed shuttlecraft that basically Scotty had been aboard, and he had, sort of put himself in the transporter console, like, I guess you could say a recirculation of the energy signature. And unfortunately, he and the other survivor, the other survivor perished, but Scotty was saved. And so there are aesthetics along those lines where the, Tig Notaro character, had been found, but she was still of the mindset much akin to Scotty in that Relics episode. It had been like 70 years, and he thought it was still 70 years in the past. Very similarly so. And then there's even the episode of Yesterday's Enterprise where Kelsey Grammer's character was in a time loop and thought it was still very much the past. So, Notaro's character in this episode is still 10 months in the past, thinking the Klingon War was still full on, ongoing. And I just thought that was a nice little character beat, to sort of witness this character who was debuted suddenly to this news that, there was an armistice. The war is over. Somehow, some way, peace is at hand. So It was an interesting reaction to that, and playing with the world building and universe building that was depicted in the first season. Of course, it didn't really go anywhere necessarily in affecting any sort of learning anything new about the energy signatures. It was more reliant on Michael Burnham's going over to the Enterprise and searching through Spock's quarters and learning more about what he knew about it. He almost seems determined that he, whatever this mission is, whatever this thing he is in search of is going to lead to his demise. Of course, we know that's not for a very long time. And even it's going to happen in an alternate universe, an alternate timeline. So it's really interesting to, harken back to Doctor Who, the timey-wimey aesthetics of Star Trek and the Star Trek canon. I really loved the uniforms ever since we saw the first shots of them, the gold, the red, and the blue. I like that there was some comment on it. Now, if you go back to actually the fiction, the books that were, based around Star Trek Discovery before actually Season 1 debuted, the very first book, which was written by David Mack, who is a Star Trek novel author, there was some comment in his book to that effect as well, that, the technologies, the disparities between the Enterprise and the Discovery and the uniforms being different, differences along those lines, that was something that was commented on in that novel, and it's also something they brought up in this episode. Pike says, we got the new uniforms, even as, spectacular as Discovery looks as far as the ship goes, its technology and everything, it's apparently more advanced than the Enterprise, which, as we see, suffers catastrophic failures, and I can only assume that is a tip of the hat to the fact that the ship will be, refitted over the course of the season and probably appear much more closely in resemblance to the original series incarnation of the ship. But, just that little nod to things like the uniforms and hearkening back again, my mind with, the addition of Pike and the likability of the performance of the actor, of the character, his interactions with everyone else. And of course, we still see that Michael is very much in the captain's seat as far as the focus goes in the series. She's still very much sort of the main character that everything revolves around. But I like that I'm getting much more of a sense of the ensemble. A lot of the bridge crew, Pike had them all call out their names. It's not only for the purposes of his getting to know them, but I think it's also for the purposes of we, the viewer, getting to know them. Now they are an ensemble. Now they have gotten used to working together. They all trust each other, and they're all interlaced and well-placed. And it's about time we get to feeling like that about them. And I felt like that very quickly into the episode when Pike requests that of them. Shout out your names, forget the ranks and everything like that. And seeing them all tooling around on the bridge, dealing with this issue and all that kind of stuff. It really felt like Star Trek. It was feeling more like Star Trek than this show has ever felt for me. So as far as the season 2 opener and debut, it was a pretty strong opening, I felt, and set up plenty of stuff to come with, Spock and these red energy signatures, whatever it happens to be. And I do think it's also kind of an interesting turnabout in the fact that, what would eventually lead to the Kelvin timeline was the red matter. Here Spock is captivated by this red energy. Is this a tip of the hat? Is it, something that was done purposely? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But whatever is going to unfold in the second season, I'm going to be on board for it, and I can't wait to see what happens. And I hope there are not nearly as many missteps as I felt there were in the first season. The gripes and issues I had with the episodes. I hope I will be sort of fanboying every episode and not finding things overtly problematic for my own personal tastes, much as I did in the first season. And otherwise I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen the Season 2 opener for Star Trek Discovery entitled Brother, what you thought of it, anything goes in the comments below, love it or hate it. And as long as you are respectful and not a Discovery basher, out of sight, out of mind, that kind of thing, or hating on others who happen to disagree with you, we're all adults here, and we should be able to get along, even if we don't happen to agree. And at this juncture, I'd also like to ask, if you enjoyed this video and would like to consider supporting my channel, please have a look at my PayPal contribution link posted both in the description as well as the comments below, where you are afforded opportunities very much akin to Patreon, in that you can set up a monthly contribution, a one-time only kind of thing, send me a personal message alongside a contribution requesting topics I may discuss in the future, request shout-outs, make recommendations of things that I could check out, and anything you saw fit to send my way would be 2 thumbs up for me and just secure my longevity on YouTube. And yeah, you know, it would just be awesome sauce if you did that. And so otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.